At Council Bluffs Savings Bank, our goal is to help you, your families, and your businesses grow and prosper for generations. We take pride in our community, whether it's volunteering our time or helping individuals, families, and businesses succeed. We provide you with the personal service and attention you deserve. With over 220 years of banking experience, decisions are made locally. We are Council Bluffs people operating at Council Bluffs Bank to help Council Bluffs be a better place to work and live. Council Bluffs Savings Bank. Hometown banking, the way it used to be. Member FDIC.
Good afternoon, everybody. And on our study session agenda, item number A is the AP Design Award, Great Places in America at Bayless Park. And Don, are you handling that?
Yes. Who are these cookies for?
They're for everyone in the audience. Please eat them.
Has some room.
I've already eaten a whole baggie by myself.
There's chocolate. Only one spoon.
Jody.
There you go. Start the process. Pass them around, Tim.
Good afternoon. If you've read the nonpareil, you probably were aware that the city received an award from the American Planning Association for Bayless Park. The staffs of my office and Larry's office submitted an application, and we received recognition this year, or notice that Bayless Park is going to be on the selected 10 Great Places in America program, and as a good role for planning. The APA is an organization representing planning commissioners, staff like myself, consultants, architects, landscape architects across the country. I'm a member, Rose is a member, Chris Gibbons is a member. First, a little bit about it. Bayless Park was actually, I didn't realize this, but it was the first city park, 1853. So it goes back some time. It is our town square of the community. I think people have always seen it that. It received a major renovation in 2004, 2005, I think 2006. Time kind of runs out. Under then the Parks Director, Ron Hopp. I almost forgot his name. They indicated that the part of the nomination is actually how the city raised its funds. When we went to the state, we've utilized local resources, we utilized a lot of private resources. Some of our names are probably in bricks over there. So that seemed to impress them. So it is a good honor, great honor for the city. I think there's only 2 others in the state. There is a neighborhood in Davenport that was designated. And I want to say Mason City had with the park in. I don't know, was that a place or was that a street? So we're in short company, and I think the only one in Nebraska is actually Lincoln. So I would like to acknowledge a couple people. I think, this is a park that, has some histories to it. Obviously, the people, it resonates with our people as kind of the centerpiece of our park system in the heart of downtown. The first person you'd have to credit is actually Ron Hopp, who was the Parks Director at the time and led the effort. I certainly would say that. RDG was the designer based out of Omaha. Their role was essentially to take a great public space known as Bayless Park and actually renovate it to make it even better. And sometimes when you have that, that's a challenge. That's a design challenge to figure out, how do you make something really nice and picturesque for the community to make it even more so. I'd have to acknowledge iOS Foundation. I think this is the perfect marriage of art and a public space, which, I think has done wonders for the park. And then the fourth is probably the public donations and the fundraising. This was I don't know how many thousands of dollars, but it was more than a few that, you know, Ron and his staff raised during that period of time. So with that, I'd like to recognize Dolores Silkworth with RDG. You want to come up and say a few things? Dolores used to work for the, I know so much about you, and so little. Dolores used to work for the city of Omaha, actually I think under Larry, under the Parks Department, and has worked for RDG for I don't know how many years, 20 years? 10. And she was the kind of the lead consultant for RDG with Marty Sugar. So.
Well, thank you for the certificate and including me in this award. It really does go to the City of Council Bluffs. Congratulations. I've got to tell you that this project, when we started it, it was 2004 when the planning first started. We didn't actually cut that ribbon until 2006. It took every bit of that to get that project completed. But it was really a testament to the resiliency of the community, you know, when faced with the fountain that was going to be, that was shut down because it was failing, how everybody came together in great numbers. Our public process we had a public meeting that was 130 people attending, very interested in what was going on, very committed to it. And all of those folks pitched right in with the fundraising and the design guidance that they provided was really pretty overwhelming. That ribbon cutting is by far the most significant event that I've had the privilege of attending in my entire career of working on public spaces. And there is nothing that makes me more proud than to call Council Bluffs my home and to have Bayless Park at the very heart of it. So thank you and congratulations to you.
Thank you, Dolores. And Bayless Park isn't Dolores' only contribution to our community. Her vision and Mark is in many places throughout the community, and we're very proud to have you working with the City Council Bluffs.
Also, I'd like to, again, recognize iWest. I believe iWest contributed not only to the renovation, but you know, worked as one of the first art pieces there. Pete, you want to say a few words? Even though this occurred before.
Yes, it did. It occurred before my time. I only have 30 minutes worth of comments to make this evening. You know, to me, what I wanted to, first of all, thank you and congratulations, Dolores. A wonderful design, beautiful, beautiful park, and to the city, congratulations too. But to me, what I wanted to punctuate when Don asked me if I would take a few moments is just what we all can do when we work together. And that's really what Bayless Park is all about. iWest Foundation made a $2.1 million grant, but raising $2.1 million to match that grant was no small feat. And as Don mentioned in his opening remarks, the state, Vision Iowa, the city made a contribution, and I think thousands of individuals made a contribution. And when we create something that we can all get passionate about, we all have ownership, and clearly everybody in this community has ownership of that park. And so we're really pleased, the foundation's really pleased to have been a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Really, what all I have. So.
Thank you. Are you gonna stay there? Because item B is Playland. I don't know if it's Jay or Ted or.
We have a little snafu.
You want us to slip it down the?
What I'd like to do is go through the, you know, the regular council agenda. If you don't mind, we'll be setting up over here, hammering, things like that.
All right.
So we'll try not to be too distractive, setting
Okay.
up the presentation.
I have a question for you on this award. You mentioned that we're one of three, Iowa, one in Nebraska.
Yeah.
I read the article, but I don't remember. How many nationwide? I know we're in small company, but
Well, the APA actually grants out they have three categories: great streets, great neighborhoods, and great places. They grant 10 a year nationally
in each category or combined?
in each category.
Okay, okay,
And I'm pretty sure Davenport's a great neighborhood.
okay.
I don't know about Mason City. It's either a place or it could be a public street too. I'm not sure.
That is very short company considering.
Well, if you figure, if you were going to, Iowa represents about 1% of the population, so I figure you always have about a 1% chance. So, you know, what's 1% out of 10? Well, they've been doing it for about 5 or 6 years, so.
Great.
But I would say Iowa tends to get one every 2, 3 years, so.
Thank you.
All right then, so we're gonna jump to C, which is review agenda. And is there any questions relative to the consent agenda?
Have a question regarding item C, which is the Mid-City Trail Park. Mr. Foster, I think that's your package. And I see that we're setting this for public hearing. I guess the items that I'm picking up in anticipation of my question are we just had community development enter into a contract, and that contract team is already starting to look about the West Broadway redevelopment options. Part of that process will be to collect public input as to what they desire to see along that corridor. During the last public hearing on that, there was a great diversity of opinions about what we ought to do with that space to include that First Avenue corridor. So I guess my question is that given that this proposes, we're contemplating spending about $425,000 for a 2-block stretch of trail, why are we doing that now as opposed to waiting until we get this feedback on the rest of the corridor?
Well, I don't think the 400,000 is quite the right number. I think that's the total, including what the school board would put in. So it's that first subtotal.
Okay.
But the answer to the question is, between Don and I and Greg, we had a lot of conversations about this very subject. How far do we go? Where do we put the trail? And the beginning of the trail really connects the riverfront over underneath the interstates and gives access to the riverfront. So that portion really isn't going to change much. But the majority of the 4 miles of the trail right now are on 2nd Avenue. And as the study goes forward, we anticipate that some of that trail, some of the pedestrian traffic will combine with other improvements and may go back over to First Avenue. So the First Avenue is likely to be a spot where there always will be some sort of flow, whether it's traffic or bicycles or whatever it is. So it makes sense now to put that middle section in.
So given that, even though the question of what we do with the rest of the West Broadway corridor is still under review, the decision's already been made to go ahead with that trail regardless?
Well, yes. Well,
Okay.
at the end of the day, you all make that decision. But we've been authorized to move forward with the grant application. The grant's been awarded. We're into design now, but at the end of the day, the council will decide whether or not we go forward with it. But
Okay.
again, to be clear, we stayed away from the vast majority of the First Avenue as part of this project for that very reason that you mentioned.
Okay.
So that it opens it up for the public's interest and design on where it ends up. Does part of it stay on 2nd? Does all of it come over to First? All those details will be worked out as you go forward with the Broadway study.
Okay.
So we tried just to pull off the pieces that weren't going to change and leave the large section, which is over on 2nd Avenue, so that it could stay on 2nd, or if the Broadway study indicates it moves to First, we can accommodate it there.
Okay. I just want to be clear about the timing, because I was a little bit concerned about the possibility that we would have 2 blocks of trail that aren't connected to anything, if you will, a trail to nowhere, and I wanted to make sure that we avoided that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions on the consent agenda?
On 3D, with regard to the North 31st Street Rehab Phase 6 project, I noticed there appeared to be a change order or a combination of change orders that resulted in a reduction of the price by over about a fifth. I was just curious if the scope of the work changed significantly during the progress, or things turned out better in price or in the work itself as it progressed. Since that's quite a good reduction, I wondered if it was a good reason for it, or if something needed to get pushed back or what.
Short answer is yes, it was for a good reason.
Good.
You know, we always have to plan for unknowns, so we include dewatering, sometimes select backfill
I see.
because the material is in poor condition. In this case, all the ideal conditions exist when we uncovered the street, and so we didn't have to dewater, we didn't have bad material that we had to replace, and so in this case we got lucky and we were able to deduct all those items. That has not been the case in recent history, so it was fortunate. As we continued up North 31st, the further we got to the north, the sandier the material was, and it became less of a problem to build on. So we weren't sure. We took a few borings, but you never know until you pull the street, and in this case it worked out.
Sounds very prudent and wonderful result. Thank you.
Other questions on the consent agenda?
Could we, sometimes on 3G, we get the list of bills. Sometimes we get it in alphabetical order, sometimes in cost from highest to lowest. Just speaking for myself, I was curious what my colleagues might think. I personally get more out of the list, quite frankly, if it's by cost as opposed to alphabetical. It just is easier for me to use. And if it was for you, I thought maybe we could ask that they do it that way.
I like it that way.
Is that?
That is so weird because I had the same thought when I was reading the list of bills, trying to scan through and look more closer at ones that are higher cost. So that would, I agree, if it can be done.
I think just a matter of sorting.
And they're not in
Excel
yes,
list
so.
or- Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yes?
Is that,
I don't,
Personally, I think the best way is to present it both ways, because some people would like to see it by cost. You see who the big ticket items are, other people want to see who got what. I think going forward, unless you tell me I shouldn't do it this way, we'll present it in both formats. Descending order by cost and alphabetical order by
I
payee.
hadn't thought about that.
Thank
That's
you.
Okay.
Fantastic. Thank
Good,
you.
good idea.
Other questions on the consent agenda? Moving on to the public hearing, any questions on the public hearings?
I have are we going to, 4A, 5A, and 7A are all combined? Are we gonna wait until the presentation for questions on that, I assume?
I don't know how you want to handle that.
I feel like
Don,
they're
what do you wanna
engrossed
do on
right
that?
now in solving the problem.
Do they want to retain questions until the presentation on Playland?
Because there's 3 agenda items tied together.
I can talk to you about the renewal stuff, if that's your wish. I would like to refer you to questions if you're not looking at it.
Okay, so mine were on the plan. So I just have a general comment then on 4A and B. I noticed, and I wanted to thank you for including the page from the planning commission. That's new, and I noticed it, and I appreciate it. You don't know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I do.
I think that's helpful, and we never got those
I
before.
do know that because my staff was gone and I had instructions to put that in your packet, so.
Excellent.
helpful.
So I did
Thank
do
you,
that.
yeah, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to surprise you with a compliment.
You did look kind of shocked.
Other public hearing questions off the master plan?
When, I don't know, I'm thinking well, I know I have other questions regarding the Playland Park amendment, and it goes to negotiations ongoing, and so I'm thinking that an executive session may be the best way to handle that, because the status of negotiations and commitments to that project are pretty important to the project going forward in my mind. I'd be interested in hearing the opinions of the other council members on that.
As far as,
What are you talking about?
Subject to the closed session, the negotiation of the contract with the developer?
The one that's currently being negotiated? Until it's in a final draft.
It's what?
Until it's a final draft, it's really not.
Right.
But can we discuss it in closed session, or does it have to be in open session?
And I could get that done before the end of this meeting. If I already had a executive session.
Okay, because I don't want to miss the opportunity to ask those questions, because the concern that I have about this is that I don't want to be building capacity that we aren't sure is going to be already spoken for or quickly filled, and or that we're moving potential lessees from areas downtown to out to the Playland Park. In other words, are we going to create vacant space here in the downtown area, similar to what the shopping centers have experienced through new TIF projects? We get a TIF, we get a shopping center built, and then another shopping center is vacated. I'm a little bit concerned about that prospect here, and the status of those negotiations or commitments might help resolve that in my mind. So that's what I'm thinking here, because we're talking about $30 million in additional TIF debt potentially, and if we're building capacity that's not going to be instantly under demand, then we have a problem.
Well, I think that maybe some of that will be addressed in the master plan discussion, but
And real quick, second.
You have the urban renewal plan, which we are obligated by law to outline various projects. Now, and I'll be the first to say, we tend to do in those, so we don't have to go through and amend them again, and we may actually have to amend this document that you're approving, the urban renewal plan, depending upon what we ultimately agree to. But we tend to underestimate what privately can be built and overestimate the city's obligations. Okay, so all I can say is that we've had some conversations, not so much about the specific use of financial tools on particular properties, but we will ultimately be getting there. The time is running near. We are looking at some other agreements that help us be able to market the site, be able to oversee the construction of improvements, and the coordination of public versus private, which is something that we have discussed. So, but as far as how we handle the negotiation, that's going to be up to the mayor. I mean, if he desires me to, have dialogue with the council, that's what we'll do. But as of this point in time, we have not made any commitments, and understand, every development agreement, every one, will come before you.
I understand, but by moving forth on the amendment and the TIF ordinance and whatnot, that we're setting things in motion to begin to move forward.
Correct?
At the same time, also tonight, we have similar projects on South 24th Street. That's $10 million in TIF debt. We have the West Broadway corridor right now. That's prior staff packages have talked about another $10 million for that, plus $11 million, I believe it was, in CIP projects. They're already mapped out.
There are significant decisions
Yep.
this community has to make. And I guess the choice will be ultimately up to this body to determine whether or not we should make those
Okay.
and pursue these endeavors.
And in most cases, that TIF debt would be subject to a viable project going in. Now, I'd say most cases, infrastructure may be TIFed, and so that may not be the case there, but the number that they're talking about is for certain developers that may come and request TIF assistance to get,
May not.
yeah.
And that's why I'm trying to seek some clarity on this. Are we building capacity in hopes that they come? Or has an entity already indicated that it intends to come, and we're building capacity to meet that anticipation?
Well, I'd say you need to wait until we give you the presentation, and there is some interest, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions on the public hearings? About ordinances for first reading? Those for third reading?
On item 6D, or I'm sorry, 6B, misspoke. The draft ordinance package and that was in the packet is outdated. That's the old language. As the minutes reflected, we amended that ordinance last week, section 1.32.01, and I have a copy of it here for you if you need it, Dick. So we just need to make sure that we're moving on the right resolution tonight.
I'm understanding that that has been done already, but we'll make sure that's accomplished.
Does that then go to fourth reading? Is that what we said last time?
Yeah,
No need?
Just
Okay.
It's very slowly.
Okay.
It went from referencing state code to the specific
Oh, got
state
it.
code,
Okay.
so I don't
I
think
just
it's
couldn't remember.
anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any input on the professional services purchasing?
Are you speaking about the draft
Yeah, that we sent
policy?
out to you, yeah, the draft policy for professional service.
I didn't see that on the agenda.
You just want our
It's
feedback,
not
is
on
that?
the
Okay,
agenda, we're just
yeah.
looking-
Oh, we were supposed to email that to you, weren't
I
we?
know, I totally forgot all about it.
I
So
did
this
too.
next, I'm like, what are you talking about? And
Can I email it to you by tomorrow?
Yeah,
Okay, sorry.
I think we all need a deadline, we forget.
I'm gonna write myself a note.
we talked about it last,
I know, I remember
2
talking about
weeks
council
ago.
until I spaced it because it wasn't written down
right,
here.
I just was bringing it up because of the purchasing and the
Yeah.
correlation.
Yeah.
Good.
Maybe
Okay.
send us,
Anything in the resolutions?
sorry.
Oh, wait.
Maybe on that is a deadline. I agree, I need a deadline or I won't
Yeah,
do
maybe
it.
if when you, or your emails
tomorrow.
tomorrow, if you remember.
Well, and could that maybe be put on the agenda for next time so that whatever people think, then we can just talk about
And
it?
did we, Dick, what's the discussion on that? That administratively, we could adopt that, or does it need to be council approval, the purchasing of professional services?
Administratively, it could be adopted. If the council wants to give it more clout, they can adopt it by resolution. That means Matt could not stray from it on his own.
So,
Okay, so if we put that on the, then that, I guess that would give Nate his deadline if it's on the agenda for November 10th.
Don't
That's
blame it all on
better
me, I
than a
said I
day.
needed a deadline too.
I was just seeing if he was
I
listening.
hope so.
I need a deadline too.
well,
November 10th.
in all honesty, it wasn't a day, this is a month, so we'd given it to you 4 weeks ago, but,
No, that's true.
anything on the resolutions?
Yes, on 7B, the Greenview Estates, or I guess it's what's now known as Greenview Estates. My question is for Public Works. And first question, we received the materials about drainage issue, and I guess my question is in the work that we anticipate being done, I would anticipate there's going to be additional capacity added for storm sewer off of Greenview. Will that mitigate some of the concerns from the homeowners down to the south?
And Greg, you want to let Randy and Charlie handle it? These are the engineers that are working on the project. And well, they'd come in, and they'd had conversations with the neighbors earlier this week, and after those conversations, they requested the opportunity to get up and kind of update everybody on what's going
Terrific.
on.
Okay, good, because I have a couple questions too, but maybe you might cover it.
Just to give you a point of reference, this is Randy Fail of the Shermer Associates, 928 Valley View. Charlie Huddleston of the Shermer Associates, we're here representing the developer. This is the proposed subdivision that's in your packet, and Greenview Road being down here to the south, Franklin being over here to the east, on the right side of the sheet. Generally speaking, it's at the top of the hill. We did have some neighbors who were south of the project express some concern. They just hadn't had an opportunity to look at the design and to talk to us about it, so we met with them last Wednesday night. This is a blow-up of what we consider to be the south end of our project. And the project is defined by this magenta line. That's the boundary of the project. So the area that they're concerned about is on that side of that blue line. The blue line being a high point, a ridge line. And that area flows to Greenview, goes under Greenview, and then goes to the south. This is a depiction of what currently happens if you drive out there today. It's agricultural land, and that's where you'd see the drainage going. This graphic shows how the drainage will be modified once the subdivision is built. So we're actually taking a portion of the area that currently drains to the south, and we're going to be taking it to the northwest. It's going to go into the brand new subdivision where we're going to build all new streets, storm sewers, sanitary sewers. And according to Greg's staff direction, we're going to provide retention and detention. So the design actually takes 8.8 acres away from the neighbors to the south and directs it to the northwest. Once they had a chance to see that, they would have liked us to take about 40 acres away, but it's about 60% of the area that we're redirecting in the other direction. So it's actually going to benefit them quite a bit. And then although no one really raised much of an issue to the north end of the project, we have a very similar situation where this is the area that drains to I-80. This is an area that currently drains into an existing development along Franklin. What do we got there? 36.6 acres if you go out there today. And once the development is done, what number have we got? It's about 14.7 acres. So again, we're taking significant area that goes into these existing residential developments, and they're going into these brand new storm sewers and brand new retention and detention ponds. So both the north end of the project and the south end of the project are going to see a significant improvement. This sheet, which is really hard to read, this is simply to show you that the south end has about 147 acres, and the north end has about 247 acres. Just to give you a reference as to what we're talking about as far as the mounting drainage.
So I have a question then. The 6 people that talked at the study session, the write-up really didn't indicate if they were for or against, or they're just asking questions. Was the conversation about drainage, and they're all satisfied as well as others?
Well, generally, they're for the project. They wish that something more could be done to help them. And as you can see from this graphic, this is our project, which is less than 10% of the drainage area that impacts them. So this is that area that Randy was pointing to, 13.8 acres. We're going to take 8.8 acres of that, and we're going to take it the other way. They would really like to see something else done here.
But that's not your project.
Right.
That would be awfully tough.
So the 80-20 in the outlots, I think Matt alluded to the fact that you were already quizzing or speaking with those people. The write-up talked about an 80-20, and you were gonna be talking to residents that are near those areas. Did I confuse that?
Are you talking about
Outlots D and
annexation?
E?
Yeah,
On the annexation.
yeah, the annexation to the south is that.
Has control of lots.
Oh, D and E? Okay, okay. All right, I probably just misread that.
You know that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Randy, was Wilshire Heights, which is in the county,
Right,
gets water runoff through their subdivision, and it's a private road, private storm drainage ditch, and
it's a
it's
lot.
relatively flat, if not backfall, and so they have water that sits there, and so their hope would be to do something that would mitigate some of that, but it's something they've lived with for 40 years, I think, and,
Yeah,
They probably just thought this was an opportunity
yeah.
to,
yeah, they've had that problem since the 70s, from
Yeah.
what they've told me, and,
Robin Hill also.
yeah, good point.
you know, Lynn, you asked if they were people at the planning commission. I believe everyone that got up there said they thought it was a good project.
Okay.
They just wanted someone to help them with their drainage.
Right, okay. Trying to figure out that 80-20 thing to see how, what was I told?
Because Greenview Road is the city line, is it not?
80% of your profits come from 20% of your
No,
customers.
that had to do with the
Oh, there you go.
the voluntary annexation.
D and E are right here.
Oh, that's what it was, the voluntary annexation, that's right. Okay. D and E is where? Okay,
And the developer.
okay. So those, okay, and that conversation is starting.
The 80-20 would be if some of this area.
So that wouldn't affect, say, streets when Greenview runs into Franklin at the right angle there at the southeast. I think it's Crestview.
No,
It doesn't affect any of that. Okay.
So if there's no objection in the 80-20 rule, then that little bit is annexed then, right? D and E, outlets D and E.
This one, I think, is a voluntary.
Voluntary, yeah, okay, got it.
As long as the state doesn't consider it a little island, that's where the 80-20
Right,
came in.
right.
They won't let them do that. Then they'll have to look at a larger annexation that
Okay.
required 80-20 participation.
So we don't know the answer on that yet.
And if I understood the write-up correctly, the developer is in discussions. I believe snow removal and even road repair on Greenview is entirely county, unless I'm mistaken. Is the discussions have been had to make certain that, you know, access, particularly during snowy times, that'll all be
Right.
taken care of. Am I correct in understanding that?
Well, it also states that Constables Public Works maintain the public roads within the city, and the county has to do.
Oh,
Not in the
yeah, I
city.
think that's right. Sometimes when you get right on the line, it's hard to tell who's who, and then neither wants it, and I don't want
Middle of
that
the
to be
road.
a situation for anyone.
We did have an example of the housing product line that they're planning on putting in the subdivision.
Oh, please.
And then the last page, there's a couple of photos of a signature boulevard system they want to anchor the subdivision.
I have a quick question. I don't know if that's, is the developer here or?
Not here at this time.
Okay, my question is on the outlots. The developer owns them. Are they gonna be retained by the developer? Or are they going to be deeded to the HOA, to the homeowners association? Do we know?
Right now, it's envisioned the homeowners association would have those.
Okay, and so there'll be covenants with the mandatory HOA, not a voluntary.
Correct.
Okay, so that it would require then that they maintain it, because that's my concern, because
Right.
I'm assuming some of that's gonna be used for your drainage,
Yes.
and then a lot of
you'll
times,
notice, there is gonna be, unique street lighting, street signage, landscaping within the median, landscaping behind the curb. And it's envisioned that HOA would also be responsible for all that.
okay, I just wanna be certain. We've had other parcels turned over to HOAs, and then they never maintained them, so I'm just wanting to make sure it's in the covenants and that they're mandatory and not voluntary. Okay.
Other questions?
I do have some additional questions about traffic flow, but not as it concerns you gentlemen. I think this applies more to Public Works.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And my question is, I'm looking at ingress and egress points in and out of this area. We already have a lot of developments going back through this area, and Greenview is the primary artery in and out of there. And the traffic flow on Greenview is pretty much a constant during either day and night. I remember that, having lived just off Greenview and the drag strip at Greenview and Longview Loop there. That was quite entertaining in the middle of the night. But as I look at this proposed project, the other entry points besides Greenview would be then Longview Loop and Franklin Avenue. And all three of those access points in turn run off Valley View. So we have an increased build in traffic flow on those four main arteries. Is there a traffic study being undertaken, or is there a plan to increase traffic capacity along those routes? Because some of those are already pretty congested.
The traffic studies that are done as part of the subdivision are primarily sight distance and making sure that it's safe to be able to pull in and out. But really, even though it carries a lot of traffic, there's really not a capacity issue in itself. You know, a two-lane road can carry, especially with limited access, which Greenview and even Valley View does. Franklin has somewhat limited access. You know, all those streets were kind of set up where there's not a lot of houses directly, but driveways onto those roadways. That will increase your capacity. So we're not anticipating any kind of capacity issues in the near term anyway, and probably not even down the road. I mean, 15,000 cars a day, even 20,000 with limited access before you have to jump to a 4-lane.
Okay, because I recall there at that intersection of Greenview and Longview, approaching either side of rush hour, you would get backups about a quarter of a mile on either side of that stop sign. So I would say, yeah, there is quite a bit of traffic running on those at certain points of the day and the evening.
Well, I'm not aware of quarter-mile backups during rush hour, but you know, we can look into it. However, you know, you don't typically design the roads for the peak volumes because you can't afford to do that.
Okay, so the short answer is no. We're not considering any additional capacity.
Because we're not anticipating any concerns.
Okay.
And if I may, on the north side of the property, I believe there is one access point somewhat to the northwest side, if you will, of the development onto Franklin before Franklin does that. I think somewhat unusual. Does that curve where it almost becomes a separate road right there at the intersection with Stephen, I think, and then I forget the other one. And then perhaps I think it mentioned a potential connection onto Kings Ridge to kind of the northwest, that existing development from, I suppose, the 70s or the 80s, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think that was designed to, wouldn't step out.
Was that designed to, it looks like it certainly was. Is there any concern, it looks like that's meant, and I think the write-up says that's meant not really to be a primary ingress or egress into the subdivision. Is there any concern that it'll become a de facto one to avoid Greenview? Franklin up there it's got some, at least to me, I'm certainly no expert on it, the sight lines, particularly as you go under the railroad tracks and the interstate, it's tricky. Right. It goes from 40 to 25.
You know, you don't build 400 homes that not have impacts.
Indeed.
You know, the question is, are the impacts, do they require mitigation?
Yeah. And I'm just wondering, I assume that those discussions have been had. I just raise the question so that you can answer that, you know, we have looked into this and that there doesn't appear to be a capacity problem.
We can anticipate problems, but, you know, we're not anticipating problems that we can't overcome. If we have to put up four-way stops at certain locations or even traffic signals, you know, those are things that we'll deal with when they come up, but at this time, we're not anticipating those kinds of major improvements needed.
That's my question, thank you.
Other questions for Greg? I believe we're on the resolution.
On E and F, I was just wondering, is it just, usually they're a little bit closer to the engineer's estimate, and both of those are in excess of 21%, and I'm just wondering, is it
One was
just,
30 and one was
yeah,
a little
oh,
over 20.
yeah, I calculated 23.8 and 21.5, the other one's only 8.4. But is that, is there something unique to those two projects, that one was emergency, but we didn't get a better deal?
Unfortunately, that seems to be the climate these days. We continue to escalate our estimates, and the bids continue to out-escalate our escalations. We're seeing an environment where there is a ton of work available for these contractors, and they're all very busy. We're competing with the interstate program, the Omaha CSO program, private development, and our own program, and we're struggling to get 2 or 3 bids. That's a good participation if we get 3 bids. We used to get 6 or 7 regularly. We never get that anymore.
Those days are over?
Yeah. And unfortunately, even on the private side, I've heard estimate. I mean, you heard a discussion on the Veterans Building, and other private construction projects are seeing the 20 to 25% overestimate. So unfortunately, our experience in the last 2 years is if we rebid it, the prices don't go down. In fact, they go up. So we're scared to attempt to try to get better prices because we haven't been successful in the recent history.
Okay. I was just kind of curious because it seemed to be a trend, an upward trend.
Yes. We haven't, obviously we're aware of it. We're looking at ways to help it, but we haven't found a solution yet.
While you're up there,
I was gonna do the same thing.
I don't know if Arts can speak to this or Greg, but on the Indian Creek, the subfloor has, after one of those rains, just lifted it up and floated it down. We have an application into FEMA, and I'm talking about D, that we think we're gonna get reimbursed from FEMA, but there's some ambiguous language in there if FEMA doesn't reimburse us. And so Greg came to me and said, if we don't get the FEMA money, how are we gonna pay for it? And I said, let's run into Art's office. And we really do have capacity from unrestricted funds that we've accumulated should we have to pay for. But the risk is, if we don't fix it, the next big rain could float $9 million more worth of subflooring away, and so it really needs fixed. And again, I don't know, Art, if you have something to say, but we've got $22 million in unrestricted funds that.
Well, we've got, as of June of 2014, we've got, I think, $17 million in our general fund. Of that, $12 million is unrestricted, undesignated.
Only missed it by 10.
So there's well, I think that first number we were talking about was total government funds.
Yeah.
But in speaking specifically to, if this is a general fund project, there's over $12 million of unrestricted funds, which could be used toward that. So if
FEMA doesn't come through.
Yeah, FEMA doesn't come through and it rises to the level where it really has to be taken care of, there is funding available to do that. Other alternatives are to borrow that amount to do that. Then you're picking up a cost of interest as well that you may not need to have. But those are, I guess the third thing is to consider it part of the levies and sewer and system and potential for sales tax. So I'm not saying that certainly is what it would be, but that's another consideration. But you got 3 options that you could be looking at as funding possibilities.
So So
should FEMA not come through.
we just wanted to make it clear to you that there are fallbacks, but the primary source would be FEMA.
Just a little bit of background on FEMA for this particular project. They have been overly concerned, I guess, with the project itself. They sent in a special investigator from Kansas City to look at it, and I walked them through the channel, and I've pushed very hard and tried to work that show that this is evidence and the damage is directly related to the June 3rd event. And obviously it's a 70-plus-year-old structure. It's not brand new. It doesn't look perfect, but I told them we're not asking for a new structure. We're asking to fix the worst damage that we believe is contributed to the disaster. But because of that, I don't know what's ultimately going to be written up or approved by them, because they have been somewhat skeptical.
Well, if we don't fix it, it presumably changes its course and causes all sorts of
Well, it could just continue to peel up layers of the subfloor, and like I say, $1 million project could become a $10 million project.
And then our downtown's built on top of it too.
Yeah.
I mean, it could. Don't even want to imagine.
Yeah, and if the forecasts about what an awful winter we're going to have come to pass, then I would anticipate that damage would increase quite a bit, so.
Good. So we did just pick out what we felt was the most important, the more imminent damage. Not everything that needs repaired, obviously, because it is an old structure. We have some long-range plans. You know, that was part of our flood mitigation program. We are looking at long-term repairs to the channel, but in this particular project, we picked out the worst of the worst that we felt had to be fixed. Otherwise, we face a bigger bill and further damage down the road.
Will this complement the later flood mitigation project, or are these kind of apples and oranges?
Some of this is not even in the area that was part of the flood program, so this is just be an added benefit. Some of it may be a wash, but we're talking 10 plus years before we even get to that flood mitigation program, so it's certainly something we need to do now.
It's a patch. Got it. Okay.
A quick question on the Oak Park Road repair. So how is the repair going to be done? I mean, are you going to redo the culvert all the way down to where Roosevelt dead ends and take care of the problem all the way down?
Yes.
Okay.
The change we are making is we are going to route the new storm sewer through right away and not through private property like it is today.
Okay.
And then steep retaining walls.
So we can avoid this problem in the future.
So will it still come down and empty right there at the foot of Roosevelt? And then are you going to repair Roosevelt because it scraped up all of the asphalt?
We're looking at Roosevelt where it outlets, because there was an overlay done some years ago and all that has been displaced, and there's all kind of sediment, and there are several issues there. But
it looks like it's going to be a real challenging repair. It's quite a steep hill.
Actually, that one, even though the bids were over estimate, came in much cheaper than my original thought because of the difficulty of the terrain and the failure that has already occurred.
Any other questions for Matt? Any other questions on the resolutions?
I have one item off the agenda, not on the agenda. Craig, we've got another call from Diane Carlson on Yellow Pole Road,
Yeah.
saying that nobody's been out there to talk to her yet. Can you make sure someone contacts her? Regarding drainage, same issue as before.
How long ago was it?
Well, she emailed today, but I think she had the same issue about a year ago. I know you guys were out there, because I had a bunch of emails that went back and forth. Well, I remember a year ago you guys contacted her, but she's got issues again, and so if you could maybe call her. Marcy's got her number.
It's a fairly steep area, and her complaint is that water comes off the interstate and then down the hill behind her house, and that it's causing rutting and erosion, and it looked like somebody had done some dirt work. There wasn't any vegetation on the ground, and there were significant ruts, but I'd say the homeowner probably did some excavation behind there maybe.
Mark at my office apparently has talked to her the last few months, and it's all on private property. It's really not a
Yeah, that was the take I had too. It was,
There's no public property involved in public responsibility. This is private drainage.
her thought was that it was water that was running off the interstate
Interstate.
system.
Which also isn't ours, and that's, we explained that to her last year, so maybe if you could just reiterate that. I mean, it's not gonna be the answer she wants to hear.
She calls it about every week, two
Oh, okay.
times a week, and apparently Mark's talked to her before multiple times, and he spoke with her son, which apparently Mark and her son have an understanding, but she's not understanding the situation. That's how I understand it.
Okay.
You understood that?
Still trying to think of what you were going.
Ted or Doug, who's up?
Can you guys? I don't think so.
Do you see it?
No, I don't think anybody over there. I can. I mean, I don't know, but-
I can. I'm at a sharp angle, but I can read it.
It's fine.
Can you? I can move
Can it
down.
like
It's fine,
tilt
I've
just a tiny
reviewed.
bit
Here, I'll move down.
so they can see it? I feel like we can, but
That's better. I can see it now. I was just a little.
On the what?
Yeah,
It's
just
like-
a little bit.
On the what?
No, we're good.
there we go. Did that help? Thank
One
you.
of those cookies underneath it.
I don't know who to speak to, but we really need automation in this room.
Yeah,
I agree.
and the camera
Speak
can't
to the new
catch it.
technology.
Sorry.
He's working on the budget right now. Don't be inside.
We'll have to add plugins.
Okay, Playland Park. The first thing I would say is, we had an amendment, or we created a document called the Playland Park Master Plan in late 2007, which was approved. At the time, we went out for requests for proposals in the midst of the downturn of the economy. And actually really didn't receive interest primarily because of that. We sat around for a while and waited and attempted again, I want to say in 2012, I think in the fall of 2012, we made some modifications, which is amendment number 1, and submitted an RFP out to the public. And we did get responses, but most of the responses were interested in the site, but they wanted to adjust the site. So in the spring of 2013, we brought before you a memorandum of understanding with the city and Nodal Development, which basically outlined essentially a planning process of city staff, Nodal companies, to bring in market expertise, and retaining HDR to do provide the design and expertise for the project. That is now essentially complete, and we have a document that we would like to present to you. I will ask both Jay and with Nodal Development and Doug Bassan with HDR, and they will kind of do a handoff back and forth and make a presentation. So Jay, you want to?
Thank you. We have a screen, we have technology, and I have a remote. So watch out, we never know. Well, I'm Jay Noddle, as Don said, and it's great to be here. We're excited. It's been quite an effort working with some of you and the city, other stakeholders, consultants, community members, and actually community members on both sides of the river at times, sort of imagining and dreaming about the possibilities. The master plan is the work product of that effort, largely authored and drawn by HDR, led by Doug Bisson and his colleagues at HDR. But it's important to realize that the great work that Sasaki and Associates have been doing for the city in collaboration with Iowa West on some of the public spaces and the other visioning projects that have taken place has certainly played a part in all of this, as have some of the early discussions about the West Broadway corridor and the work effort that's really just getting kicked off. So a lot of information kind of hitting the funnel at the same time. It comes out in the form of this master plan. Doug and I will go through it. It's detailed. We'll try to go through it as quickly as we can, but forgive me if we get going too quickly. Just stop either one of us along the way. And Councilman, I wrote down your comments earlier and your questions, and if we don't get them addressed here, whatever forum is most appropriate, we're happy to try to address all of your questions.
Thank you, sir.
So with that, contents. We can skip that. To put this in context, we've been studying the Playland Park property at the river's edge, and it shouldn't go unnoticed that we think that from a public relations and an identity standpoint, river's edge is really nice, and it's descriptive and it's forward thinking. So you'll hear us refer to this as river's edge. You'll hear us refer to this as Playland Park. And maybe most appropriately, Playland Park at the river's edge. So the area that we've been focused on primarily is the area in green, which is the property owned and controlled by the city. But while we've been doing that, we've also been thinking about what kind of an impact we can have on our edge or on the fringe. And when this is successful, what's next? And so we try to be very diligent about thinking beyond our borders. So there's been, as Don mentioned earlier, there's been other looks at the property. There's been RFPs, requests for proposal in the past. There's been really good submittals that have come the city's way, and two of those are the two images on the right-hand side of this page. And then there's been several different versions of site planning done. One example of that is the image at the bottom left. In all cases, these proposals represent more than one type of residential space. And so when we talk about residential spaces, there's apartments, there's townhomes, there's single-family homes, kind of detached homes. Sometimes you'll hear the term two-story walk-ups or brownstones. Those are types of homes. Then there's ownership types. Some might be for rent or for lease. Others might be contemplated for ownership. And really with the only exception being the apartments, true traditional apartments, most everything can be owned and really should be owned. And we think that good planning incorporates not just a goal, but requirements for ownership. Be that ownership of residential spaces or ownership of commercial spaces. Not always as practical with commercial spaces, but we sure don't want to leave that out of the mix. So there's been a lot of planning efforts. You're all very familiar with the way the pedestrian bridge lands and how Tom Hannafin Park is laid out. The image at the bottom left shows a concept to take Tom Hannafin Park from where it is to where it might be. I think that's probably, and Larry Foster might correct me, but I think that's probably the last public image or image that's been shown publicly of what could happen on the east side, the immediate east side of the park. This is the interstate system. The area in purple is, again, the site. It's very important to recognize that while discussions are underway and we understand them to be productive and that a lot of progress has been made, a final agreement with IDOT and the city and the other stakeholders that might be a party to that agreement is very, very important, if not critical, in getting to a ribbon cutting here at the river's edge. The roadways have to be right. They don't have to be all complete when construction starts. It would be really nice if they were mostly complete when construction ends. There are some temporary things that can happen, but at the very least, it's important that those arrangements are made, they're documented, they're approved, that funding's in place, and there's certainty of outcome before major construction starts on the site itself. So with respect to the master plan before you, this is what you have, and I think it's on page 10, it may be page 11 in your packet. My page numbers may be different than yours. But this is the full build out of the Playland Park property as we know it today. It starts working from east to west. It starts with a new entrance from Broadway and from the interstate into the property. So that, oops, excuse me, that's right here. So this is reconstructed. Today the entranceway is here. And this is what I was saying. This can serve as the ingress egress point during construction and maybe for a very limited time at the beginning. But shortly after that, this really needs to be operational. And we don't see any reason why that can't happen.
Hate to interrupt you.
Please do.
We were discussing this at the last council meeting, and I asked whether or not IDOT had arrived at a recommendation for that connection with West Broadway and 480, because at least as of today, the IDOT website still says that that's an open question, that they haven't gotten there yet. So I guess my concern is, how certain are we that that's going to be the final solution?
Well, first off, we share the concern. However, it's maybe less of a concern and more of an item to be completed now. And if I misspeak here,
Well, if you're talking specifically about 40th Street, I don't know if you're talking about the whole geometry, but 40th Street really is a must under any design. If you look, that's where the ramp starts to get on the interstate. Compare that length of that ramp to the length of the ramp at 41st Street. The ramp at 41st Street is way, way under design. It's not long enough, so it's almost a given that ramp has to be longer, which means 40th Street becomes the end of the ramp.
To get to speed.
Yeah, to make the ramp longer.
So certainly it seems to be the case, but I guess my concern is that IDOT hasn't yet decided that investment is going to be made on their end. So it's possible that may not be an entry point to 480 at that point, and then if that doesn't materialize, then traffic would be pushed onto other routes in and out of the area.
well, frankly, if that doesn't materialize, the project probably doesn't materialize. I can say this, I'm very certain that IDOT has been in a lot of meetings with many people in this room and several beyond. We are very, very encouraged by the reports from those meetings, both firsthand and secondhand. And candidly, as a result of that feedback and the progress that's being made, that's why the drawing is here today. That's actually why we're here today.
Okay, yeah, I didn't mean to throw off your
No,
train of
it's
thought.
you're good.
Because my concern is, as planning goes, it ain't over till it's over. So
Well, I think that if nothing else, this kind of will more likely than not give IDOT that final ounce of courage to push the ball across the goal line here.
okay, understand.
Okay. So working from the east to the west, at the end of the day, this would be the major entry point. There'll be other entry points from the north. But we have, and you have a label, you have an index on your page that shows the different uses. The highlights are that these buildings, these are probably restaurants in the future. They probably come at the tail end when the demand in the immediate neighborhood is at its highest. These two buildings can be mixed-use buildings, multiple stories, 2 or 3 floors, and a combination of commercial spaces, and in that location, more likely to be service-related uses and either offices above or apartments above. They could also be a great spot for live-work style spaces, which becomes more popular in areas like this. Then, as we head west on Avenue A, this is the main thoroughfare through the project. There will be residential spaces on both sides of Avenue A with first floor retail. And those first floor retail spaces will be designed and constructed by others such that they can be converted to other uses in the future. And one of the lessons we've learned about projects like this and buildings that have mixed use within themselves, it's important to think about the first use, but it's maybe more important to think about the second use. So in other words, how can you adaptively reuse a space in the future? And a lot of thought's gone into that. Then as we get to the center of the project, this is the major apartment component of the project. It itself has about 140 apartments. We'll get to who the developers are in a little bit here, but it is intended to be both inclusive within itself and so can depend on itself for parking and some amenities, but it needs to be a working part of the area itself, thus the retail spaces on the first floor.
I have a question.
Yes.
So 130 apartments, you're looking at legend item number 4 or legend item number 5? Because there's two different types of apartments.
Just a minute.
Okay.
So go to my legend.
Okay.
Legend item 4.
Okay.
It's called a podium style building. It's got parking and the retail spaces on the first floor inside the building.
Right. Okay.
And then apartments above, and it's about 140.
140.
I believe 142 in that building.
Okay.
It's terrible to get down to the single digits because they always change. So we'll say 140-ish.
Yeah. Okay.
And right next to the on-ramp of the interstate, it makes complete sense as you transition in different parts of the...
Yeah, and that's why actually the open end of the project faces to the south. We can do some things, or they can do some things along this retained area here to quiet the noise and lessen the impact. So major apartment complex here. This area just immediately to the north is where the style of spaces starts to transition. These could be townhomes, or some people call them villas. I think the real message is 2 stories, have their own parking spaces, and available to be leased or to be owned. And that's really the key, available to be leased or to be owned. And then as you get further north, on the north end of these blocks, these will be living spaces that will primarily be available for ownership. Then as we get here, in the northwest corner of the site, that's the area that's most opportune for condominiums, which would be strictly ownership. There may be a situation, I suppose, where someone could own more than one, and maybe they have somebody else living in one, but in terms of the organization of the project, those would be dedicated to ownership. To put that in perspective, we believe they'd be similar to the 2 Riverfront Place mid-rise towers on the west side of the river, adjacent to the bridge on that side. So something very similar, built probably on a pedestal. That pedestal probably has parking and mechanical equipment to serve those buildings inside of it. And then the perimeter of the building would be lined with uses that are compatible with what's across the street, wherever possible. It's not always possible, but wherever possible. So, you could have live-work kinds of spaces in here. Maybe they're studio apartments, or it's just something that isn't a blank wall, that is a use that's compatible with its neighbor. And then here on the southwest sort of corner of that piece, this would be something that's programmed more for public use, community spaces, indoor areas that are compatible with an expanded park and public space in through here. Lastly, there are 2 office buildings and a parking structure planned in this area. The drawing that you have in front of you represents what could be 200 to 230,000 square feet of office space. To put that in perspective, that gets close to 1,000 jobs based on kind of industry standard ratios. We don't have to go that far. When we talk about 800, 900 jobs, irrespective of the amount of space it goes in, we have to provide spaces for all those folks to park. So in this version of the plan, this garage and some surface parking areas are designed to accommodate that demand, would be reserved for the office buildings during the hours that the tenants require, which would include some time for some of the spaces on the weekends, but not all of it. And the rest of the time, that parking can be available to the public to take some of the demand for activities that are happening in the park and so forth. The way the space breaks down now, this building is approximately 50,000 square feet. Oops. That's it. We're done. Thank goodness Ted comes along to drive. Thanks, Ted. So the order of magnitude might be about 50,000 feet here. That's what we're currently thinking, 3 stories. And around 150,000, maybe a little bit more here, and that would be 5 or 6 stories. So in all, a lot of development. You have some final statistics in the packet, or some totals in the packet. Dense, comprehensive, vertically and horizontally integrated, great pedestrian and vehicular ways, and very representative of what's most popular for homeowners, for renters, for employers, and for small retail service-related businesses, not just in this part of the country, but really throughout the country. Here's an image of how this might look from west, looking to the east. This image is a match with the master plan that we just went through. So the condo towers on the left, office buildings on the right, apartments immediately east, and then the spaces that are more likely to be available for home ownership over in this area. We've done some planning to anticipate what might happen if the best business solution and market matched solution would be one condominium tower, whether it's larger or smaller or wider or taller, we don't know. But how does the site work if there's one tower versus 2? And our preference and our recommendation is to do what we can to get to 2. And we would never expect that they're built at once. But there's some interesting things that can happen if we plan for 2. But on the off chance we get to 1, really the only changes are right in here. And you can see that it's not much of a difference in terms of land utilization and how the roads work and so forth. With that, I'm going to ask Doug Bassan from HDR to walk you through what we call the framework.
Thank you, Jake. As you look through the plan, we have what we call the framework elements, and these start getting into more of the detail and how this whole plan begins to lay out. So on this image that you're looking at right now, we call these the different street types. So the plan itself is fairly prescriptive in nature, and it doesn't want to leave a lot to chance. So it begins to identify what the look and feel of each of those streets should become, laying out basically number of lanes, where the parking occurs, landscape parkway strips, street trees, and that sort of thing. So again, kind of the key element in this is Avenue A, which becomes that really prime axial street that connects east to west through the site itself. This shows you the cross section of Avenue A, and I think this one's really exciting. There's no other street in the metro area that looks or functions like this. Basically, on the right-hand side, you see the street itself. You've got a lane of traffic in each direction. You have on-street parallel parking. And then if you look on the south side, this pink strip, that represents a cycle track. Basically, it's a designated bicycle route, lane in each direction. There's been a lot of talk in the metro area on the west side of the river of something like this happening, but I think this is a real chance for Council Bluffs to really lead the way in this. And this would help tie in the regional riverfront trail into the site and actually help with connectivity underneath the interstate and then ultimately over into the West Broadway and Avenue A corridor. And then if you look to the left of that or the south of that, that's a pedestrian promenade. So as Jay mentioned a lot about the street level retail uses along the residential lining Avenue A, picture that as this really active promenade. So people walking back and forth along Avenue A. And you really get the full range of mobility from vehicles to bicyclists and pedestrians. The next several images begin to show what this could look like. So this is a rendering giving you a sense of the look and feel of this corridor. So once again, on-street parking, traffic, cycle track, and then promenade. Really a truly unique place. And then this points out some of the finer grained details of what that could look like. Again, all this has to go into design, nothing's finalized, but this just gives a good sense of what this space and the street could ultimately be. Moving on, mixed-use streets. So as Jay mentioned, the potential along 40th Street to have mixed-use buildings. This lays that out. Trying to maximize parking on the street. We have both rear-end diagonal parking. It could be head-end diagonal parking and parallel parking. And then we show the mixed-use street or mixed-use buildings, wide sidewalks, and then you have parkway strips with trees to provide some shade. The next street is the general residential streets. These are the two streets that connect in, whether it's 40th Street or 41st Street. And the key thing here is how you connect in basically the cycle track that would be along Avenue A. And we've already begun making some changes to this, showing more of a side path. That would be a bicycle pathway off to one side that would connect south to the south side of Interstate 480 and then ultimately to the regional trail network. But again, you see heavy landscaping because you would have some residential and commercial uses, trying to separate that heavy traffic that will be coming into the site and buffer that. Next one is the residential side street. This begins to show you more of a residential look and feel. You start getting street yards where you can do more intensive landscaping and more residential in look and feel. And then Avenue B is an existing street. So what we want to do is provide on-street parking on one side of that. It already exists, but you start providing, again, parkway strips to get some more street trees in that location. And then finally, the big picture is the piazza. So as Avenue A extends all the way to the west, as it begins to make the curve to head and parallel the levee, this is what Sasaki is going to be working on. But the general look and feel of this is going to be an at-grade, curbless street. And the key thing here is this street needs to be designed as a public venue. So envision all sorts of activities programmed here, whether it's festivals, or anything else. It would have a single grade, and lanes would be demarcated by different color pavers and textures, and it would bleed really right into the riverfront itself and the porch, that other space that Jay had mentioned. So this will undergo a whole series of design refinement as this process moves forward. this diagram begins to lay out the bike and pedestrian network, and I won't go into every detail, but I think the big picture of this is it's a fairly robust network to get people through the site. So there's opportunities to arrive and depart from the site via vehicle, via bicycle, and via sidewalk for the pedestrians. Very rich, lots of opportunities. Once again, I think a truly unique place within the metro area. And then I'll turn it back over to Jay, who will talk about the development opportunities.
I've got a question for you. You're encouraging a lot of bike traffic down in this area. Are you allowing for places to park those bikes?
The question is, are we allowing for places to park the bikes? That will definitely be a design detail that we arrive at. I'm going to get back to the promenade. There's ample places you see at these corner nodes. So as we get into further refined design, we anticipate that there will be bicycle parking racks there and other opportunities. So we want to encourage that and provide as many opportunities as possible.
Thank you. So development opportunities. I mentioned earlier that we would anticipate at least four, if not 6 or 7 different development projects. Some might be multi-phased, but it's also reasonable to expect that there will be just as many developers working. And this program, this book that we've been going through, they really act as the design guidelines and principles going forward. So there'd be an architectural control approval committee put into place. We'll be in a position where anyone that's interested, you hand them this, or in today's world, you email them this. And just about any design professional that they might be engaged with can work pretty easily from a document like this, and frankly, they welcome it more often than not. So just kind of walking through the different development opportunities, this is a thought about the condo towers. It's nothing more than a thought, maybe an educated thought, but it's intended and it's crafted in this manner to be an illustrative example to others of the kinds of things we're looking for. And this gives you sort of a first look at how, one suggestion on how the parking and some of the mechanical equipment is under the pedestal, but then how that pedestal might be lined with storefronts and spaces that are pretty inviting. We talked about the guidelines. This just breaks this project, down into blocks. And I won't take the time to go through all this, but we break down land use. We give some photographs of buildings that have been built that are good examples from a qualitative or a style standpoint. We're maybe a little bit less concerned about style and more concerned about materials and screening and transparency and how it feels at the street level and how it looks from a rooftop. We work on setbacks. We want to encourage bringing buildings as close to the street as we can so it feels nice and tight and urban. Give more examples. Work on different thoughts on height so the project sort of stacks in at full completion in a pleasing way. I should go back and say we also work quite a bit on view corridors, making sure that we maintain corridors, and we use the setbacks and the heights to do that. But it would be a shame to see this happen and not allow this part of this project to have a view corridor between these two buildings or up this way and things like that. This is height. This is a diagram on where parking would go for this particular example. So a combination of structures in the darker areas here and here, and then surface parking areas, some of them private surface parking areas like dedicated to the apartment project in this area, but surface parking nonetheless. views of how parking can be screened. This really focuses on Avenue A, the pedestrian, and I mean, this is a really important place where pedestrians, bikes, skateboards, rollerblades, and cars and trucks all interact with one another.
Skateboards.
It'll happen.
It's an inside joke.
Okay.
Skateboards.
That'll happen too. Just some ideas on how we might treat those areas. We get back to the master plan. Place for you to take notes. Let's see, I can't get back, so we'll stay there. So, just to kind of sum it up, there's been a lot of work, there's been a lot of effort, there's a lot of excitement. We're at a point now where our company, Novel Companies, is ready to move forward and kind of move from a volunteer role into a very serious role. Not that volunteerism isn't serious, but we're ready to go. In order to facilitate this development, we are prepared to be the community's master developer by contract with the city. I think that comes up at some point in the not terribly distant future. We are prepared to move forward with the investment and the risk associated with the first office building here and the parking structure. We're working with Iowa West for them to have a new home here, and I do understand that creates a vacancy downtown, but the kind of space that Iowa West would like to be in, the kind of facility that they'd like to help create at the front door to Iowa, quite frankly, and certainly or at least the western front door, is not something that's really feasible in their current location. So we're very pleased that they'll go with us in this first building. I wish they'd grow really quickly and take the whole thing, but they're not in a position to do that yet, are you, Pete?
Dream on.
Dream on, he says. We are dreaming. We're turning dreams into reality. There are several businesses interested in joining them in that building, and there are several businesses that are interested in the building to the south. We really haven't been on the market because you haven't given us an approval of this plan, but through our networks and the things we do on a daily basis, certainly there are many that are aware. Some of it's been done through the efforts of the chambers and the collaboration and cooperation that now exists even more so between the Council Bluffs and Omaha chambers has helped raise the awareness, at least preliminarily, quite a bit. So we feel really good about it, and we're ready to go with our next round of work. Broadmoor Development Company, who you'll hear from later tonight, has been working in your community for a long time. They are absolutely excited and prepared not only to do this, but to go across the street on the north side of Avenue A and work on a product that they've done in other developments they've been a part of, Exarban Village, and a place at 156th and Pacific Street as well. They've got a product that they think will work terrific here, and we agree with them. So we're really pleased that Broadmoor is ready to join us now. We've been working with several developers that have been active in this region, in this part of the country, with condominium projects, some very near, some not so near in terms of their geography, but there's an awful lot of interest in that, and we need to now take some time and sort through those that are interested, get them a little bit more information, and hopefully we'll be in a position to have some choices to recommend on different condo developers in the not terribly distant future. So you have a plan, you have developers ready to make a commitment. There's a terrific opportunity for a public-private partnership here. Some of the questions earlier as I was listening and making notes, there are commitments that will be required from the city and others in order to make this whole thing come together. But in the end, it's great to be here. It's got terrific possibilities. There have been enough folks that have looked at this carefully and worked on it and kept working on it to get us here today. as a group, and we expect great things from the project. And if everything goes close to the schedule we're playing with, we can get to a point where we could begin to see some early infrastructure, civil engineering kind of work taking place over the summer. And our goal would be to have the first buildings ready by the end of 2016, somewhere in that time frame. And the two things standing between us and that eventuality are approvals from you folks and the other bodies that'll be required along the way in that agreement from IDOT. But everybody's comfortable enough with the status of that. We're going to keep going and try to get to a groundbreaking here sometime soon.
So as a point of reference, if you don't know, Broadmoor is the apartment developer around the golf course, and also did apartment development in Exurban Village that Jay worked on. So.
Yeah, they're one of the region's most successful. They really know what they're doing.
Two questions for you that I didn't really see addressed yet, but maybe I'm getting too into the detail. How many? It's a great project, by the way, and I was involved in the meetings, 2006, public meetings that we kind of had a listening charrette or whatever you call it, and I actually dug that stuff out of my closet. And this is, I mean, it's
Are we
pretty
close?
It's pretty darn close, because back in 2006 we talked about the density farther towards the interstate and townhomes opposite the single family homes. The pocket park is not there, but we have Hannafin Park, so that's a good trade-off. Two questions regarding the residential. The first question is 2016, you talked about for the business, but when do you envision the first residential kind of units possibly being in existence? And then how many residents do you think this area will eventually hold?
Okay. Both great questions. Broadmoor will start when we start. So there will be offices, parking, and apartments being developed simultaneous. They'll all kind of be done at the same time. I don't know beyond the initial phase of what Broadmoor will do, just like I don't know beyond the first office building that we'll do. We don't know the timing of the second piece yet. But we're already talking to several developers that are in the residential part of the industry about parts and pieces of the project. And really the industry's kind of waiting to see, are they really going to start? Who's involved? What's the schedule look like? And almost all of those questions are either answered in this document or they'll be answered by the outcome of your votes in the next several council meetings.
And I think
Does that answer your question?
It answers part one, and then part two. How many residents do you envision this
In total?
Yeah.
Well, there's
Just a guess, I know
there's about, when you add up the different types of spaces, if we're close on our count, and I think we are, at the end there could be 500 people living here.
Okay.
It's about 1.5 people per residence, and I mean that's a pretty good guide. That's what a lot of things in the industry key off of. And so we don't have any reason to think that won't be the case here.
Okay, yeah, because I envision there'll probably be some shifting of existing residents from other parts of the city and here, but more importantly to me, drawing people from outside the area who want to live and possibly work in Council Bluffs. That's pretty exciting.
Okay, thanks.
Well, and I think
Yeah.
Broadmoor's experience has been almost 100% occupancy in their
That's
apartment.
350.
So I
Really?
think they're excited about
Okay.
the opportunity.
Or is that the riverfront or whatever they're called? Those ones? Is that the one?
River Park.
Yeah,
River
those
Park,
are
yeah.
always pretty. Yeah, those
Very
are nice,
nice.
super nice. Yeah.
They're very, very successful throughout the Midwest. I couldn't tell you how many different projects they've done. I know we've watched them and been involved with probably a dozen over the years. We seem to work alongside of them quite a bit, but not always.
Do you envision that the condominium development is going to depend on pre-sales, that the developer's not gonna feel comfortable going forward without doing pre-sales? I know I've heard back and forth about why they're successful on the other side of the river, you know, everything from view to, you know, not having a market for it. Is there concern there?
Well, there's concern. It's sort of normal. Each developer will be different. Their financial situations will be different. So then their financing alternatives might be a little bit different. I don't know anyone that wouldn't want some level of pre-sales, however firm they are, in hand before they start. But you know, if you look at the marketplace, there's been 2 mid-rise, many would argue short, condominium towers that have been built along the river corridor in this metropolitan area of 800,000+ people. We can use a couple more in our metropolitan area. It'll be very advantageous to some that the zip code is in Iowa, because there's different benefits to living in Iowa. We can see all kinds of possibilities, and we've validated a number of those. We think that's why it's kind of nice to have some alternative developers for that product type. And frankly, if we stick to the 2-tower plan, we could have 2 different developers. I mean, that isn't totally out of the question. Logistically, it might be kind of hard, and you know, the timing would be critical, and probably wouldn't allow for sharing of some of the lower level, some of the things that could be placed in the lower, you know, in the pedestal in the lower parts of that segment of the project. But it's happened before, so we want to leave those options open.
I just want to thank you for seeing the vision and the opportunity there that I think we've all seen, and appreciate what has come back to us, because it's nice to see that somebody else doesn't think that we should just settle. And this is definitely fulfilling what I had envisioned for down there based on prior plans, and I appreciate all the work you put into it. I really do.
Well, thank you. Thank your colleagues, your staff, the stakeholders in the community. These are group efforts. They really are. So we appreciate your words.
I'd like to return briefly to the office structures.
Sure.
And you talked about the number of potential employees that these 2 structures would hold. That's a large number of positions.
Mm-hmm.
My question returns to what it was before, and that is there a particular large-scale employer that we are seeking to accommodate in this? You spoke of several businesses being interested, and you also spoke of assuming some building risk. Mm-hmm. So my question is, are we trying to accommodate a large employer and trying to provide some additional capacity beyond that, try and fill in? Or are we kind of designing the ideal urban environment and hoping that people are drawn to it?
Well, we're doing both, which isn't a hedge. Our core business beyond strategic planning is office space. So what we're really trying to do is we're trying to match up to the most active part of the marketplace in the metropolitan area. And that's employers, well, the most active part of the marketplace that's a match for these style buildings. So that's employers that might occupy between 10 and 50,000 square feet. The industry standard, the rule of thumb, is today somewhere between 4 to 5 employees or colleagues for every 1,000 square feet. So that's kind of where the numbers of jobs come from. What we've tried to do here is be as smart about this as we can be. And in the first building is going to be 50,000 square feet-ish, you know, plus or minus a little bit. It feels like it wants to be 3 floors. I believe that's where we're headed. It results in a floor size that's pretty flexible. We can get more than one tenant on that floor without, multiple tenants actually, without creating a lot of common area that's necessary but doesn't go to work for anybody. Yet at the same time, it's got to be serviced, it's got to be paid for. So the first building, I think, is kind of locked down, and we're very comfortable with the market. We're ready to go. The second building, we're trying to play off of some of the lessons we've learned over the last 20 years. Sometimes there's a specific business that reaches out or that we hear about, and we try to match up to, as best we can, to exactly what their needs might be. And you know, part of what happens is we have to kind of determine the difference between wants and needs. Usually there's a pretty good difference. But we try to match up to what we think they might need. And many times it works, and we don't have to look any further. And oftentimes, if we're flexible and thorough enough with our work, the work we might do to attract you. Maybe we're not successful in attracting you, but it was thorough enough that we got Nate Watson. And that happens an awful lot in our industry. So we're after both at the same time. We're trying to design a project that could thrive and be wildly successful with a 3-story building in both locations and 600 office workers. Yet at the same time, we want to be nimble. So that if the market says it's time, we can go to 6 stories and still have a 3-story building that doesn't feel out of scale or vice versa, and be able to accommodate 900 workers.
Okay. So there's not a single large-scale employer that we're looking at attracting. I guess given the amount of demand that we currently have, and I gauge that by the amount of vacancy that currently exists within Council Bluffs. I assume then that we're trying to draw folks over from the other side of the river, or we have semi-solid commitments from other places in the country, or are we headed the way of Houston, where they experienced a pretty significant building boom in their downtown area, and they now suffer from about a 70% vacancy rate?
Well, so let me try to remember all those. There's a lot of questions in there. The first is, you didn't really ask it direct, but the first is these buildings, when they're offered to the marketplace, will be done so at a rent that might be a bit pioneering for the immediate Council Bluffs marketplace. Won't be pioneering for the metropolitan area, but it's going to be a little bit more expensive than the Council Bluffs alternatives have provided in the past. So I don't expect a land rush. We're expecting some, but I don't really think that this is necessarily intended or would clear out large sections of space that currently exist. We'd love to have those conversations. We are trying to attract business from within the region. We are trying to be in the queue. We want to give the economic development folks the work product that is on a par with what a site selector might look at from Houston or San Francisco, Dallas, Denver, Atlanta, Indianapolis, Kansas City, Omaha, so that when they're working with their clients, we can hand them something that doesn't stick out because it's not a well thought out, state-of-the-art product. Rental rates here are going to be on a par with maybe some of the suburban alternatives in the metropolitan area, and that's kind of where they need to be in order for it to reach the greatest audience. I would not be honest if I didn't say we don't have some specific businesses in mind. We probably have quite a few more in mind than those that are sort of in the rumor mill, and it would be very premature and not terribly professional for me to mention any names. But we're out there. We think we know what's going on in the marketplace. We think we know who's looking from within and who's looking from a distance. And our colleagues at the combined chamber, and that's a big deal. The two chambers combining and comparing notes and sharing ideas and whatnot, that does make a difference. So I can imagine that this is going to be on a lot of radar screens in the near term, assuming you put us in a position to do that.
Well, and this goes for the benefit of my other council members, that's why I was suggesting that perhaps closed session might be helpful in order for us to provide some form and substance to this jello, because I think it would help me feel a lot better if we knew some of those details so that we could help formulate how close we are on some of these.
You know, it's important to note that the risk, if this goes to risk and if it goes to market impact, both existing, what we'll call office stock, and new, a great public-private partnership is structured so that both sides, or both participants, I don't want to call them sides, the table needs to be round, but that both participants share the risk. The community has the risk of the funding and that goes along with it. They take a risk in the bet they make, no pun intended, on a development team. The private sector takes the risk in designing and delivering a building. So there's shared risk, there's shared frustrations in all projects, and hopefully shared enjoyment at the end. But I don't want you to think, we wouldn't ask that the community do anything other than be ready. It's very important that the private sector be in a position to make a commitment to a prospective occupant. And, excuse me, in order for the private sector to be in that position, we, or if it's not us, others, and if they don't ask you for these commitments, then they should, we need to know with absolute certainty that if we make a commitment to build your firm a building, whether we're going to own it or you're going to own it or a third party is going to own it, if we make a commitment to do that, we need to know that the community will deliver the resources necessary to do their part. And it may kind of feel like a chicken and an egg, and you know what, it is. But a lot of it then goes to who you're dealing with. What's their reputation? Where do they live? What's their track record? Have they done it before? Do they understand where the fatal flaws might be? And so forth. And I think that I think you have a pretty darn well-rounded team here. I could also add, and I was remiss for not mentioning it, that Noddle did an extensive request for proposal with design firms and their partners, looking for the best match to design the 2 office buildings, the common areas that go with it, and the garage. And after had about a month of interviews and a little bit of hand-wringing, there's always a little bit of hand-wringing in making a choice, we selected the architectural studio that's part of HDR, that's led by a fellow by the name of Tom Trenelone, who we've done a few buildings with now and are very comfortable with. More of a coincidence that Doug and, well, I don't know how much of a coincidence it is that Doug and Tom are both with the same global organization. We've also selected Kiewit to build the office building and the parking garage. So from Noddle's standpoint, from our standpoint, this is our team. Our co-developer in Broadmoor is a group we've worked alongside of a lot. And the projects have been pretty successful. The 2 that you would know the most, at least in the Omaha area, are Exarban Village and One Pacific Place. And both are working okay. And so we feel very comfortable with the group we've got put together and where we're headed, assuming you would like us to go there. So I don't know if that helps. We can certainly be part of a closed session. We can be in the hall for a closed session as well, whatever makes the most sense.
Well, speaking just for me, and my vote this evening, I do fully intend to vote in favor of all 3 of the agenda items related to this project. I think it's a great potential. I think it's a great step forward for the City of Council Bluffs. You have a proven track record. You, Broadmoor, many of the companies that you have mentioned We've got a great team, Mayor Walsh guidance, with Don and his group and everybody involved. So I think, of course, there's risk on both sides, but if you don't take a step, you're not gonna go anywhere. And that's my opinion, and I think it looks great, and it would be a perfect addition to Council Bluffs.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jay? For Doug or Don?
Let me just ask you all a question. When we get to the presentation tonight, this is pretty long and it takes quite a while to go through this. We can do it much quicker. For your group, it would seem we could, that may be appropriate, that might be okay. For the audience that's here tonight, how much detail, Mayor, would you like us to go through? Should we do this quicker or?
Yeah, I think the expedited version is probably perfect.
Okay.
Maybe 2 or 3 slides, and make sure that you point it toward the camera so that the people watching at home, I don't know if you have a large poster board or something.
We can see what we can do.
Or even if there's a way to turn that.
To turn that.
We want the TV. Most, if anybody, they're sitting around here, they'll be watching on TV. So it'd be better if we could somehow get
Okay.
it on
Turn
video.
that around.
But the detail on the streets and all that kind of stuff, it sounds like maybe we can stick to just the master plan and maybe the watercolor that shows the different buildings.
Things
But maybe
like
one
this,
street
I
view.
don't think
Maybe
people
one
have
street
really
view would
seen,
be-
and I get a lot of questions, and probably
Yeah,
Rollins does.
that's good.
And if you could be certain to point out, I think that there is still some confusion on it, just based on what I've read on the Nonpareil's Facebook page, people are posting comments. If you could make it really clear that Hannafin Park is gonna stay.
Okay.
This isn't being built there. Because everything I read would indicate to me that there's some confusion by the public that, for some reason that park's going away. So if you could just kind of make clear where this is
Sure.
gonna be located. And the bike trail, or the bike, path too, I think would be really interesting to share.
You know, there have been a lot of concerns that I do believe this plan fully addresses with regard to access. Certainly, we're not closing off in any way the public's right to experience the riverfront. Indeed, the piazza seems to be enhancing it significantly. And then another question that might be wise to address is briefly mentioning the obviously not a guarantee at this point, but it appears that the fruitful discussions with IDOT about access, because currently access is less than ideal, to put it charitably, and so there's a lot of concern about that. But on the other hand, some of the discussion, which I would agree with, is talked about. Well, certainly private developers such as yourself would not be interested in this area if you didn't think it had a realistic shot of being a success. So things like that might be helpful to briefly discuss.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks again, and anything else that anybody wants to talk about, or?
If I could just, the question was raised earlier, whether we go to executive session. Did some reviewing here. A couple years ago, the Senate file 430 was amended to essentially state that preliminary drafts are not, or they are considered confidential. And then 21.51A provides that we can go into executive session to discuss confidential documents. There is a clear path.
Do you want to do that now?
Probably do that before, unless the property acquisition is relatively short.
That's off.
No, it's
No,
not.
it's
It's
off.
off.
Excuse me.
Well, and since there's not
I don't see a need to go into executive
I'm
session.
comfortable. I mean,
Yeah,
if there's
comfortable.
information that.
If Nate and I want to, I have no issue with it. Before we do though, I think.
I think if he wants to ask a few questions,
We have somebody that wanted to speak though.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to, I was like, wait, before we get too far down this. Can Carol, she just want to talk real quick to us, is that okay with everybody? Do we have?
Talk about what?
I just have a very, just a brief comment. Actually, probably rather surprising in most of your experiences of public comment. Carol Horner, 1606 South 12th Street. I'm actually here on behalf of Live Well Council Bluffs. I serve as the board president. Our mission really is to create healthy people and healthy places. And we just want to appreciate the city and the council and the developers that are putting together things that include such things as walkability, bikeability in the neighborhoods and in the parks. green spaces, play spaces, and those kinds of things. So we just wanted to say thank you for including those things in the specs. Please continue to do that. And we are available to offer any supports as it relates to those kinds of things. We study that a lot about walkability. It's a big part of some of the requirements we have for our curb projects and stuff. So it's really, really good for healthy communities to have that. And we just wanted to say thanks for promoting that. I know you don't get appreciated very often, so I want to make sure I got it.
You know, I think it's only fair if a colleague has questions that can be addressed in that session. And so I would be supportive of giving that opportunity to do so.
Well, I guess unless I wasn't hearing things quite correctly, I think we may already have an answer to the question. I guess, again, I was attempting to nail down just who we envisioned would be the primary tenants of the office spaces, and therefore how some of the living spaces might be driven.
So to that end, Jay, since the onus is on you, do you feel comfortable speculating in a closed session if we go that route, or would you professionally rather not do that?
Well, I wouldn't be comfortable talking about the identity of certain businesses. I think, you start with two developers that are ready. You'll hear from Bob Stratton when we come back up there.
Yeah, sure.
You'll hear from Bob Stratton, I believe it'll be Bob from Broadmoor Development Company tonight. You're going to hear something very abbreviated, but the same thing from him. They're ready to go. And what we're telling you is that we're ready to go on office building number 1. We further said that the Iowa West Foundation has agreed to anchor that building. Beyond that, it would not be appropriate for me to discuss the other businesses we're talking to about going into that building, or the larger building for that matter. But I can assure you, we're having a lot of conversations. We wouldn't be here if we didn't think there was a pretty darn good chance there's a market. And quite frankly, the project makes a very nice, would hold a very nice place in our body of work. With one building, it holds a much nice place in our body of work with 2 buildings.
And it's, to alleviate some concern maybe, you are going to be the developer of that office building, and so you can have some level of confidence before
Yes, sir.
you put your money.
Yes, sir.
And I completely appreciate the fact that negotiations for this type of project are delicate at best, and that you have a very difficult position in how much you're able to disclose. At the same time, recognize the position that we're looking at here, that we're being asked to make a $30 million investment, substantial, a 50% increase in current debt load just for this one project. And so I'm looking for some degree of comfort that this capacity is going to be occupied.
Well,
Go ahead. The resolution before you is not committing you to $30 million. The question is whether you want to approve a master plan. Do you think that this should be built in our community?
But I also understand that this sets a course of actions. This commits us to saying that we're in support.
Which you will have to, and others in this room, will ultimately have to agree to.
And I understand that.
So what happens if it's 10 million? What happens if it's 50 million? We don't know fully.
Okay.
I think before you is a master plan that we have adopted, we've prepared. The question is do you want us to move forward on that?
Okay, I understand. And the master plan.
And your concern, obviously, is future commitments. We understand that.
Yeah, and I understand that at a certain point, risk is ordinary business. So you have to assume a certain bit of risk in order to get things developed in this state because of our tax laws. You wrote that up very eloquently on the other project.
But I just want to understand, by adopting this resolution tonight, You are not committing to $30 million. It's implied, I understand, but you're not gonna go out there and write a check.
I understand. I understand. As we begin to march down this path, I want to make sure that we're going in with eyes wide
Eyes wide open. And you know, really, what the way we're accustomed to this, and I don't know if you're aware of this, this is similar to things that we've done in at least 20 different communities and 20 different states and lots of communities throughout the country. So it's not limited to just what you see in Omaha or across the state of Iowa. But you know, what's important is to know that the regulating authorities, the regulating bodies, the community, and all of the potential public side partners understand the global project, realize that this will come in phases. Certain parts of it aren't practical to come in phases. You've got to build the infrastructure. Got to put the sewer and the water lines in. It's better to put all the roads in at once and kind of get that work over with. But then, you know, we're in a position where we're going to come right back to you right away with Broadmoor, and we're both going to make application that may not be the right term of art, but forgive me for that. We're going to be right into documenting the first 2 or 3 vertical build components of the project. They're going to have some public funding associated with that. It won't be $30 million, I don't think. Not day one, but we might be right back to you with a second request or a third request. It may be us, it may be the condo developer, it might be Broadmoor extending what they're already doing. Could be just as, and I don't want to say just, I'll take that back. It could be a single family home developer. And so you'll get a series of requests. This will be ongoing. This won't be our last meeting. You'll see a lot of us. So I think the community needs to understand what this can be. When you do the math, if you follow that chart, the one that has the square footages and the number of residences and whatnot, when you follow that chart, at the end of the day, this is getting close to $100 million joint investment. It'll happen over some time. You'll have your role. The developers, the private sector will have theirs. But it's not a request to go do all this today. I'd love to be back here in a couple months saying, guess what? The moon and the stars lined up, and the ink is dry, and we're ready to do more, and let's keep going right away.
Okay.
Does that help?
A little, because tonight we are being asked to take first reading on an ordinance to create a TIF district.
Mm-hmm.
So.
You're amending the TIF district. You're not creating it. The TIF district already exists.
Okay.
The only area, I could show you on the map, the only area that you're adding is a small residential area that we acquired between the interstate and Avenue B on the east side. That's it. That's all. It is contemplated that it's going to be here. In this development. But like Jay has said, it's a little ways out. But it is one of the things that we had to do. But the bigger purpose, we have to outline a variety of projects according to the urban renewal law and make those available to the public. We tried and attempted to do that. There's 2 ways to think about that. Give you the big shock, or as each time we do a project, we do an amendment. The challenge of each time doing it, the 4-month process. 4 months before we can even engage in a development agreement. So, you're talking 6 months. So we're trying to do our best effort of estimating what it is so that we could go straight to a development agreement and not have to amend.
And I came into this kind of almost giddy because for that very reason, I thought, ooh, we must have a definite bird in the hand, if you will, that we are trying to capitalize on an opportunity very quickly. And
I think where we probably are fairly accurate is the description of the various phases, or accurate enough. Whether or not we are right on the number, too high, too low, I think that's where the issue will be.
And isn't it fair to say that until you have something in writing, you're not going to start the second building until you're sure you have an anchor for it?
Oh, that's absolutely correct. In our history, we've been around 43 years. My dad took the first shift, I got this shift. We've never started a building completely, not an office building, completely on a speculative basis. It's just not, it's not out there. But you have to be ready. The developer has to have his or her arrangements made with the community. It's got to be zoned. We got to have financing in place. We got to have drawings. We need to know what that building's going to cost. This is not for the weak of heart. We need to, in order for us to be ready, we are mentally, physically, and financially committed. And we have to be ready to respond. So, I mean, to your point, the marketplace is active. And we don't know where this will shake out in the final analysis, but we do believe we know what it takes to be ready. And to get ourselves in a position for all of us collectively, it's everybody, to win. And our goal is to get buildings out of the ground full of employees, and better yet, folks that want to live right there, that don't currently live in Potawatomi County. Whether it's not all going to line up quite that way. That's a pretty nice storybook, but a lot of it can happen. We just need to be comfortable with one another, and we need to be ready.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Okay, see you at 7.
see you at 7.
At Council Bluffs Savings Bank, we take pride in our community and volunteering our time to helping individuals, families, and businesses succeed. We are Council Bluffs people operating a Council Bluffs bank to help Council Bluffs be a better place to work and live. Hometown banking, the way it used to be.